After working with creatives for the last 11 years, I've heard one statement more than any other. I hate marketing. I get it. It can be painful trying to figure out how to market your book or movie or comic. When I started podcasting, I had no clue how to do any of it. I was afraid of doing it wrong, looking like an idiot or making a marketing mistake that I could not recover from. It can be paralyzing. Sound familiar? If it does, let me see if I can help you. I got my MBA in marketing, so you don't have to. Sign up for a free session today to talk about your marketing goals and to see if we're a good fit. If nothing else, you'll get some insights that might ease your mind. Go to southgatesmallbusiness.com and sign up for a free session today. Welcome to Alley Chats. I'm your host, Rob Southgate. Alley Chats is a virtual artist alley featuring interviews with artists, filmmakers, podcasters, writers, really any creative person you might find at a pop culture convention. My goal is to help draw attention to cool people and to hopefully help them get some new fans. I want this podcast to raise up these amazing people and to inspire you, the listener, to chase your dreams as well. You can follow Alley Chats on Facebook and join the conversation. I'll add more social media in the future, but for now, that's the best place to interact with me. You can also email me directly if you would like to be a guest or have a guest suggestion. My email is rob@smgpods.com. Today's guest is C.M. Forrest. He's an author of novels and short stories and a self-proclaimed horror movie expert. And he's a guest at the Books and Brews event coming up this August 3rd in Evanston, Illinois. There's a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. Anyway, here's C.M. Forrest. Hey, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell people who you are, what you do? Let's hear it.
Thanks for having me, first of all. My name is, I write under the name C.M. Forrest, and my real name is a very closely guarded secret. It's mostly to keep myself and my family safe from my millions of fans. But I'm going to tell you, it's also Christian is my name, and Christian Laforet. I write under both, but recently I've started writing under C.M. Forrest just to separate my non-horror from horror. So sure. C.M. Forrest is the scary guy. Christian, this jolly fella you're looking at right now, he's the happy-go-lucky guy.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to call you Christian because I don't want to bring the scary one forward. Actually, I probably do. So, but it's kind of weird to call you CM the whole time. So I'm going to call you. Yeah,
that's like one of those things that after I came up with the pen name, I was like, oof, it's weird because people do sometimes call me CM, and I'm like, that's so bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I know so many people that do that where they like name their kid. Now, I am actually George Robert Southgate the 7th. So they could have done GR or G Jr. or George Jr. Like I'm GJ. That's one that I have a friend who does that with their kid. And I'm like, really? Really?
I mean,
that poor kid forever.
GR7 though. You could be GR7. That's
GR7's actually kind of cool. Maybe that's going to be my new DJ name. I'm going to start mixing it up here. All right. So Christian is an author, a horror author. Well, CM is a horror author. You've confused me already, man.
No, sorry. It's what I do.
But he is also going to be on Books and Brews, that event that we're talking about this month. And all the links are going to be in the show notes. It's August 3rd. It's in Evanston, Illinois. And there's 40 authors. It's super cool. I am so excited about this event. And you're going to be there. So after you hear this, you're all going to want to go there and meet C.M. Forrest. For sure. And then you can call them out and be like, I know your name. Okay, so let's get into it. First of all, you've got a bunch of books here that all look super cool. What is your latest book?
Well, technically my latest book is Infested, which is my debut novel. So I'd written a lot of short stories over the years and had several published in anthologies and whatever. I had a short story collection or two under my own name. But once I switched to C.M. Forrest, that's when my first novel was published, which was Infested. But it it was my latest book because I had a novella that I wrote after Infested, but was published before Infested, which is called We All Fall Before the Harvest. So it's actually the newer book in terms of when I wrote it, but it's the older book from when it came out. So it's kind of weird for me because like my newer book is Infested, but that's a book I wrote for years, whereas We All Fall Before the Harvest I wrote quickly just a couple of years ago, and it came out really fast. So it's kind of strange that like to the public, Infested's newer, but Harvest is way newer in terms of in my life.
I got to say, 11 years of podcasting. I have no idea how many interviews. I think you and I have succeeded in creating the craziest maze of answers already. You might be my favorite interview ever. So we're going to find out by the end. Spoiler, I don't know. Okay, we're going to get serious. Like it's going to get serious, but I'm going to ask some questions because I do want to find some things out. So what was the thing that inspired you to start writing?
Well, I mean, like I've always been a storyteller. So even as a kid, I was always a drawer. Like I liked to draw as a kid. I wanted to be a comic artist. That was kind of my goal through all my childhood life and then well into my adult life. I went to school for animation. The idea was again animation school was like the closest thing to comic book school I could find. So I went to school for animation and honestly, it kind of killed my love of drawing because I had to draw so damn much.
Because it's a job. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So once animation was over, once school was over, and there was really no jobs locally for animation, I would have had to move. And my wife's very established here with her job, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I kind of stepped back and really started thinking about what I liked about drawing, and it really hit me that what I liked about it was the storytelling.
Yeah.
I would tell stories through my drawings. And so I started playing with this idea of writing. And it really was like, it initially was writing comic book scripts that I would draw. And then I still hated drawing. By the way, I still hate drawing. It literally killed drawing for the whole rest of my life. Like,
oh,
go to hell in animation school. Yeah. So, so I didn't want to draw the comics. I just was going to write them. And then finding people to draw comics was hard. And I was like, forget this. I'm just going to write prose. I'm going to try it. And I was like in love. I wrote a novel in like 3 weeks. It was
wow.
I mean, look, I don't know if this is going to be a video, if this is going to be shown as a video, but if not, I'm doing air quotes right now when I say novel because, yeah, it's terrible. It was a terrible thing. It was awful. It was not good, but it was just the writing. It was like,
you got to start
incredible.
somewhere though. I mean, everyone's first thing is pretty much crap, even if they don't admit it.
Yeah, but it wasn't even like I didn't even care. Like it was so fun writing it, and I just had I had such a blast doing it that was it. I was hooked, and horror has always been in my DNA. Like since I was a kid, it's I kind of liken it to some kind of weird like Stockholm syndrome because when I was a child, my brother would babysit me, and he was older than me by 5 years. So when I was like 8 or 9, and he was like 13 or 14 or whatever, he would watch horror movies and I had to watch them with him because he was babysitting me, and I'd be too scared to be elsewhere in the house and hear Jason brutalizing people. So I would just sit and I'd watch with him, and I became obsessed with horror movies from a very young age. And so always horror. I'm always fascinated by horror stories.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, the next question I was going to ask is what drew you to horror, but it sounds like your brother drew you to it by torturing you.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, it's funny. I've seen like I saw Daniel Kraus speak one time, and hopefully we'll be interviewing him here on this series, and he'll probably tell the same story. So if you hear it here, know that I busted his story. But he said how he was a kid, he was like terrified of everything, and he was like, and now here I am, a horror writer. I think we're drawn like a moth to a flame. My parents used to take me to like a haunted house, and I would cry and pretty much crap my pants and it's funny because I'm the same way. I love horror. I can't get enough of it. But back then I'd be like, take me to everything horror, and then I would be a puddle. So who knows? So,
yeah, that's probably a pretty common story, I bet.
So with horror, you said the movies, that was kind of your entry point. Okay, we're going to ask an odd question here. I mean, it's not odd, but it's odd for what we're doing here. What are your top 3 horror movies?
Okay, so I mean, I consider The Shining to be the best horror movie. I love The Shining. I love the book, and I know Stephen King hates the Kubrick movie, like with a passion, but I love The Shining. I feel like it's just to me is like a perfect horror film. So that's always got to be there. An all-time favorite of mine, Friday the 13th, Part 4, the
Part
final
4.
chapter.
Oh, yeah.
It is like peak 80s slasher movie. It's so good. I love it so much. It was still scary. It was like really just everything I love about slasher movies is captured in Friday the 13th, Part 4. Great film. And then it's a little tougher from there because it's kind of those two sit at the top. But I mean, I'm very fond of some of the, classic stuff like Exorcist. I don't really go too far back. I'm not that much of a cinemaphile that I'm talking like, Nosferatu or something, or
Yeah,
really
right.
old stuff. But I mean, I love Texas. I love Exorcist. Trying to think of something a little more off the beaten
You don't
path though
have
that I
to. Those are great
really
movies,
enjoy.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. I should have had this ready. What am I thinking? I should have had this. This should be fired up, queued up, ready to go.
Always. I mean, you're a horror
Yeah.
writer. People are going to
I
ask this
know.
question.
Yeah,
Get
this is
ready
good.
for when I ask you about horror writers. You're really going to be in trouble. Want more shows like this? We've got a lot more on the Southgate Media Group Patreon page. Some free, some paid. Plus, there's exclusive content for subscribers only. Follow the link in the show notes or look up Southgate Media Group on Patreon and check out the cool stuff we're doing over there. You won't be sorry. On August 3rd, 2024, Books of Horror is presenting Books and Brews at Double Clutch Brewing Company in Evanston, Illinois. There will be over 40 horror authors for a book signing and meetup from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. that day. Meet your favorite authors, discover new authors, meet Books of Horror friends in real life, including the author I'm talking with on this podcast. Oh, and I'll be there too. This is an all-ages event. Food, alcohol, and non-alcoholic beverages will be available. No outside food or drinks will be allowed. Search for Books of Horror Presents Books and Brews on Facebook events for more information, or click on the link in the show notes. I hope to see you there. So it's funny because a friend of mine does the Chicago Film Festival in California. In fact, he's been on this show. His name is Eric Eichelberg. They just did Friday the 13th Part 6 out there. They screened it. I guess people went crazy. Like, when it first came out, it's like, oh yeah, this is great. You're a Friday fan. And then now that they're like showing it in the revival theaters, people are getting a handle on why this stuff is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, in my opinion, 4 and 6 are the two best, hands down, of the Friday movies.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a blast. So have you seen the horror genre change over the years, or are you still thinking like, yeah, it's still the same kind of core thing? Because to me, it's always evolving.
I would say so. I think that it's the messages are still there. I mean, there's always been that like the moral thing, right? Like the good girl doesn't get killed, the drug smokers and sex fiends all get killed. But I mean, I think that's what's evolved is like as we become more self-aware of our feelings and our place in society and how we approach situations and our own, like I said, our own emotions and things like that. You see, I think, deeper dives into movies that are, I mean, I would say more specifically with movies, and I'm only using movies because they're easier to digest in one go. But you see stuff like It Follows, where the message is still pretty obvious, but it's something that you wouldn't have seen done in the 80s or the 90s, where everything was a lot more shallow level, surface level, very easy to read. And it's like, oh, the messaging and kind of social aspect of like our where we are and the things we do and the consequences of our actions and all these things, I think is being reflected a little more closely than it used to be. Certainly to a more detail and more depth, but that's the thing is, even though there is that evolution, it's still, that's kind of the core of horror movies, right? Do or don't do this thing that you should or shouldn't do. And it's like, and you will pay for it for some reason or another.
Yeah. Yeah. And it used to be a little bit more simple. Like when I was a kid and we were watching Friday the 13th and Freddy, and those were kind of the big movies that were coming out. And it was like pretty simple. You're a teenager, you have sex, you're dead.
Yeah.
But now it's like it might be the same message, but it seems like there's a lot more complicated stuff going on. Like take the Jordan Peele movies where you're like, hey, these are horror movies, or take Ty West movies where you're like, could you boil it down to that alone, or is there something else more horrific going on here? And I'm pretty fascinated by it. And I find it in books too. I
Oh
find that
yeah, definitely.
the horror that I'm reading now, like it used to be Stephen King, and now it's like Stephen King and this and that, and like read a Josh Mallerman, read I can't think of any names right now. I've done too many of these interviews. Read a CM Forrest, and you're going to
That's right.
find that it's different, man. And I like how I don't like to put labels on things, but I like how the genres are blending.
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's totally a result of the information age we live in, that everything is immediate. You're getting influence. In the past, you were only getting influence from whatever was local to you. So even if that was bigger, like all of America, it was still American influence. Whereas now it's
yeah,
like you're being influenced by stuff all around the world instantly. So you're getting all these different cultures and ideas and ways of approaching story and scary things. And it's all kind of been infused together into some of these writers or filmmakers now that are just kind of incorporating all these elements that are make it so much more interesting.
yeah. I look forward to where it goes when you think about like Netflix. As you were saying it, I realized how many like J horror and Korean horror and Brit horror, like stuff that we weren't exposed to before. And I'm like, oh man, I've watched a ton of it now.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really just like, you would get the Ring, and so you'd get a whole bunch of J horror, but that was all basically the Ring. It was
Right,
like that,
right.
but that was it. That was like 100% of the Japanese influence horror you were gonna get was gonna be that. And now the doors are open. You can watch anything and take from anything.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. Um, so as a writer, you said you wrote a lot of short stories, and now you're writing novels. Do you see yourself as going forward, like focusing more on being a novelist, or are you still like a man, short stories are where it's at, but I'm going to keep writing novels and going back to that well?
I mean, short stories. I'm not like necessarily a person that loves writing short stories. It's just I do love the more like instant gratification of writing a short story and that it doesn't
Sure.
take long. They get published quickly. So like in a year, I might have 5 or 6 short stories published, but that whole year I'm writing one novel that's not going to be published for years. So I kind of like to have the short stories because then they do give me that little kind of that little boost every few months. I got something coming out, at least whatever. But my focus is mostly on writing a long form fiction. And of course, that said, I have a short story collection coming out. It's being published in the fall. But it's really just mostly all the short stories I've had published over the last few years are being collected into one edition with a few other shorts. So uh, it kind of just makes me a liar and say that like I do write a lot of shorts and I still have shorts coming out, but like my focus is on novels. I'm currently working on a novel right now, but who knows when it'll be done. These things are monsters and take forever sometimes.
Yeah, I always found short stories to be kind of like chewing gum, and I love short stories, but it's like you got to have that in the middle. You can't just, well, I mean, some
Yeah,
can. I can't.
sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's weird. I mean, I know people who just exclusively write novels, and I always find it a little odd. But again, I came up writing short stories. That's really where I cut my teeth. After my first absolutely terrible novel I wrote, I was like, oh man, I don't know how to write at all. I need to learn how to write. And so I started writing short stories, and that's where I learned to write really. So um, it's always like they're near and dear to me, but I don't have any more excitement writing a short story than a novel. In fact, when you write a novel, obviously the sense of accomplishment is so much bigger.
Yeah, right, right. So, what qualities do you think a story needs to qualify as a good horror story?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different answers to that, honestly. I mean, for me personally, I like to write for longer stories. I like to be a little more traditional. Like I've had, for instance, Infested compared to a lot of older, like stuff from the 70s and 80s. Just like, I'm not trying to, with my novels, I'm not really trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm trying to just make a fun, scary time. I want it to be fast. I want it to be exciting. I want it to be creepy and scary. Whereas with my shorter stuff is when I get a little more experimental with the writing and try new things, try to change the voice a little, try to just I'm much more willing to risk it, I guess, because of the commitment is not as big. If it's honestly,
Right.
if I totally botch it, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, okay, Infested. I want to talk about Infested. Yeah. This is going to be another one of those lay on questions. If you don't have an answer for it, you're going to be like, why didn't I think about it? So Infested, obviously, whenever we have a story or we're creating a film or a comic, there are certain things that we're drawing from that we're in particular getting inspired by. What would you say were the biggest inspirations for you when writing Infested?
Well, Infested is one of those my stories when I have an idea for a story, they sort of come out of nowhere. I mean, they materialize just out of thin air. Like it's hard to pinpoint the moment that a story kind of came to me. Infested's different. So Infested, I was listening to. It was a very specific piece of music. I was listening to the Social Network soundtrack, which is Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. And there's one of the tracks is called "Hand Covers Bruise." And I was listening to it. I had my headphones on, and I was just kind of messing around on my computer typing. And I was listening to that track, and I thought of this woman standing in her apartment, just looking out at snow falling. And it was like a very peaceful, kind of somber scene, but knowing that there was a whole apartment building's worth of hell behind her. That
Yeah.
when she turns away from this window in this nice, quiet scene, she's going to have to face down just this awful thing to live. Didn't know what the thing was, didn't know anything beyond that. And that's literally the scene I wrote while listening to it, was just her looking out at the snow, thinking about eventually she's going to have to turn around and face this thing. And so I wrote that. It was a couple paragraphs. I set it aside. And then when it came time to start thinking about writing another novel after my disastrous first attempt, I kind of went through my ideas and I saw that one, and I started thinking more and more about it. And I talked to some friends, and then it just from there just started unraveled. It was like a big fruit roll up. It just opened up before me, and I ate it up.
Okay, what flavor fruit roll up was it?
I feel like it's probably like a cherry, maybe like a strawberry kiwi.
Okay.
So something nice, something tasty, nothing too weird.
Yeah, the quickest answer you had. You must be sitting
Yeah.
there thinking about fruit roll-ups, right?
I mean, I'm pretty much usually always thinking about fruit roll up. So
So okay, authors. Who are your favorites? Who are the ones that like your touchstones?
well, I
They
mean,
don't have to be horror either. I mean,
yeah,
we're not one thing.
sure. I mean, I mostly read horror. I do read pretty like wide. Like there's no like genre I don't read, but I would say for every 5 horror novels I read one other, so horror is
Sure.
definitely my most read area. So I mean, there's the obvious answer, Stephen King. Everybody, it's impossible to, if you write horror in 2024, if you're not inspired by Stephen King, the people you are inspired by were inspired by Stephen King. So
Right.
like you are in some way through some 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of way, you're inspired by Stephen King. So Stephen King, and I love Stephen King, I read Stephen King all the time, but I would say that's more just because Stephen King's been there from my whole life, from when I started reading horror till today. He's just been always there.
Yeah.
But in terms of my own writing, the two biggest influences for sure would be Adam Neville and Nick Cutter. So I was lucky enough to meet Nick Cutter, whose real name is Craig Davidson. He writes all kinds of different genres. So Nick Cutter's his horror, his scary guy. And just it was reading both of those two guys' works and finally reading a writers that to me wrote in a similar vein that I did. Like I hadn't read anybody that had a voice that I felt like was kind of close to my own. And so I actually was kind of changing the way I wrote, thinking maybe nobody wrote like I write. So, but then I read The Ritual by Adam Neville, and then I read The Deep by Nick Cutter, and I was like, whoa, this is what I'm trying to achieve with my writing, is this kind of voice. And I haven't I hadn't seen it before. So finally reading something like that. And then, everything since then, I love those guys. I love their work is so good. So they're definitely the top. Oh, another one I got to add is Michael Slade. So yeah, people probably don't know who Mike. Well, I'm sure a lot of people do, but a lot of people also don't. Michael Slade is was a group of lawyers out of BC who wrote together under the name Michael Slade, and they have a bunch of books that came out in the '80s. They're kind of like horror thrillers. They always have a serial killer. And it's over the years, the lawyers have all whittled down to just one guy who still writes under the name Michael Slade. Okay. So it's actually is a guy now instead of like four guys. But
did the others? Did he kill them off? I mean, is there some kind of story there, or is it just?
I mean,
survival of the fittest.
Know. I don't want to ask because again, he is a lawyer, so I'd be a little frightened to bring that up. But yeah, I don't know. All I know is the earlier books had like way more weird, like perverted stuff, and that's gone away. So I guess that specific person left the group.
The pervy guy, he's gone.
The perv took off, I guess.
So, okay. The reason that we're encountering each other here is this event, this Books and Brews. It's going to take place in Evanston, August 3rd. All the links are going to be in the show notes. Your links will be in the show notes so people can interact with you. But this is a great chance to get out there, meet horror authors, meet people in person, get a signature. I'm sure you're going to be happy to sign things when you're there, maybe a selfie or two. Now, where are you located? Are you in Chicago?
No. Actually, I'm up north. I'm in Canada. I'm in although I am in Canada, I'm actually about as far south as Chicago. I live in the most southern point of Canada, which is the city's called Windsor, and it's right on the border of Detroit. So,
oh wow,
yeah, like I could be in Detroit in 5 minutes if I wanted to. So, and I mean, I go all across the border all the time. That's one of the things about living in Windsor is everybody here goes to Detroit because it's right there.
It's right there, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to be driving down. It's about a 5-hour drive for me.
Okay. Oh, that's not bad at all. Yeah,
not too bad.
I was guessing Canada because I saw the Tim Hortons cup behind you. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Like, really?
Wait, there's a Tim Hortons? Where is it?
Yeah.
I was laughing about that when there's a podcast called Someone Knows Something. It's a true crime podcast. It's exceptional. And one of the seasons, there was a true crime in this Canadian town. And when you listen to it, you start noticing that every single story, they either went to a Tim Hortons, they were working at a Tim Hortons, the event happens at a Tim Hortons, like everything is around. And I was like, is Canada just every single thing Tim Hortons? Because it might be.
I mean, I take it you've never been here because
I have not been. No, I can't say that. I have been to Canada, but I've been in Canada where there is no Tim Hortons.
Like Yukon?
On Middle Bass Island, which is in Ohio, when you drive to the One Peak, your phone says, "Welcome to Canada." So I've been in Canada on Middle Bass Island, which it's just homes, right. But it's so funny. And I think I made the joke there too. Like, where's the Tim Hortons? I'm here. But,
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a Tim Hortons on almost every block. Like, there's so many Tim Hortons here. It's insane. Like, if you drive like 10 minutes through my city in any direction, you will pass at least 5 or 6 Tim Hortons.
Wow.
They're all over the place. Yeah, we love our Tims.
So you're going to be in Chicagoland to be at Books and Brews. Obviously, you're coming here. What is it that you most want to see or do?
Like at the event or in Chicago?
In Chicago.
Oh, I'm not really sure yet because I'm coming down on the Friday. Then I was lured down because I was told there's going to be a pizza party, which that will get me there for sure. So I'm coming down Friday. And then Saturday is the show. And then I am staying till Sunday, but there's also apparently some sort of after party. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get into Chicago. If I do go, it'll be Sunday. But then I also heard like Lollapalooza or something's in town.
So yeah. You're a little worried about traffic, maybe?
Crazy. Yeah. We'll see. So my wife is coming with me. So there's a good chance she's going to just abandon me on Saturday and she'll go into Chicago. Okay. And just hang out.
Hey, you know what? The number one thing should be going for pizza in Chicago. So there's Lou Malnati's right there in Evanston. You cannot do better, in my opinion.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and I know you're not going to believe me. Nobody believes me, but everyone listening, you need to look up Windsor, Ontario pizza. We have legendary pizza. Like there's so
Detroit has
many
great
pizza.
pizza. I can imagine. I can
Yeah,
imagine.
it's like we took like third. One of our places took third in like the pizza world championships or something. Like,
Wow.
oh no, we got tons of pizza here. There's actually Windsor style pizza is pretty well known, and it's like, so good.
So good. Well,
So
you know what?
don't get me wrong. I'm
You
excited. I'm looking forward to Chicago pizza because I've never had it.
I do what we call coffee palooza when I travel all over the country and that all over the world. Actually, I always look for the roasters and do the whole thing as I just love it. Uh, I wish it could be pizza palooza. We're gluten free, so it's like I got to find the gluten free ones. But if you're
Oh
gluten
yeah,
free, I have recommendations in Chicago as well. So
yeah.
yeah, so
I
I'm jealous.
thankfully am not, but for my, you know what, my daughter actually, she's going in for a test. She might be.
Yeah, we
So
have celiac in this house, so we got to be
yeah,
super serious about it. So, all right, now I've just said instead of being horror, now we've turned into a bummer show about health. Uh,
yeah, more, more.
wah, wah. All
Yeah.
right, so I think that's all I really had for you. Although you laid something in there that actually happens on this show. I'm going to ask you this question. I haven't been doing this. You said, are you talking about the event or are you talking about Chicago? So now we're going to talk about the event. Here's the question I ask on this show. It's called Alley Chats. It's a virtual artist alley. You have a table, you're sitting there. That has nothing to do with what I'm going to ask. I'm just
Okay.
setting the scene, right?
Okay, you
I
got it.
so this is the ultimate con, okay? Who is it that you most want to meet? Living, dead. It's your rules. It's the ultimate.
Oh,
Who would be like your number one person? Like, damn, I would love to meet them.
I mean, not to be just like a Mr. Boring plain Jane here, but I gotta get a Stephen King autograph in my life. I have, and these things are like I have to sell my kids if I want one at this point. This guy's
Yeah,
not even dead, and I gotta sell my kids to get his autograph. So I'm like, I would if I could meet anybody, I would probably certainly within the realm of like what I do and what I writing and all this stuff. I would probably say Stephen King. Not even, I mean, it would be great to talk to him, but more to be like slap down my copy of it and be like, sign that, good sir. And I would be so happy to get that. I would just be like, my life is complete. I finally got a Stephen King autograph. Because let's be real, Stephen King's pretty old. I mean, he could go, and when he goes, those things are going to be like just
yeah.
ridiculous expensive. So I need to get one now, and they're in the hundreds and not the thousands.
I am not going to call that boring. I'm not going to call that plain Jane. I think that's an awesome answer because who wouldn't want to meet Stephen King?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody would want to meet Stephen King, but that's just probably not true.
There's got to be somebody, right? Who's like, I
Yeah,
hate him.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There's definitely somebody.
What have you got coming up? What's the next thing for you?
So the next, well, typically, I mean, and this is probably the answer for most horror writers. I mean, my busy season for sure for events and appearances is September, October. I have a whole bunch of stuff coming up in September and October. There's a horror author convention. It's the first one in Ontario. It's called like DreadCon, but capital R in the Dread. So like ReadCon, but
Yeah,
DreadCon.
yeah. I like that.
Yeah, and it has I'll be there. It's in September in Waterloo, Ontario, and it's got Andrew Piper, Nick Cutter will be there. I'll be there. There's a whole bunch of A Zhang will be there. She just won a Stoker Award. So that's a big event I'm looking forward to. And then in also in the fall, I'll be at Frightmare in the Falls, which is a Niagara Falls horror convention.
Yeah.
I just heard Sam Raimi's going to be there, so
Ooh,
I'm
cool.
stoked for that. Yeah, to see Sam Raimi. But and then a whole bunch of stuff. I got book signings coming up. If you go to I don't want to plug too much here, but if you go to my website, it's christianlaforet.com because it predated my pen name. And if you look up events, I got a whole bunch of stuff coming up, like signings and readings and appearances. Most of it local, but still, there's quite a bit there.
Very cool. In fact, we'll put that in the show notes. I encourage everybody follow your newsletter, follow his website, go check this stuff out and go get your signature because I mean, he's not getting any younger either. So he could be the
Yeah,
next
look,
Stephen King and
quite a bit of gray happening here, so
yeah, I'm not
you
throwing
know.
stones, trust me. So, Christian, this was so much fun. I can't wait to meet you at Books and Brews. I'll be there. In fact, I just was told today I have a table. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh,
I'll have
hey,
a table.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
I'll be the one guy sitting there with like a microphone. Everyone else has books. I'll be like, hi, hi, that's me. But yeah, we'll be there. We'll get to meet, we'll get to talk about pizza, and it's going to be awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So thank you again. Everybody follow Christian stuff. And once again, it's all in the show notes. Be active, share his stuff, tell people about it, and follow his newsletter, follow him around the country. Go visit him in Windsor. I hear he's a nice guy, or at least Christian is. CM, I'm a little sketcy about.
Yeah, you got to stay away from CM. He's shady.
Yeah. So that's it. GR7 is out.
Thank you very much.
It would really help me out if you would rate and review this show on whatever platform you use to listen to this podcast. Good reviews help others find the show, which ultimately helps the people I've interviewed get more exposure. You can connect with me on social media or via email. All the links are found in the show notes. If you like this show, you'll like other shows from Southgate Media Group as well, such as Read Between the Lines, a podcast featuring insightful interviews with some of the hottest authors out there, or Go Fund This, a podcast where we interview people about their amazing crowdfunding projects. You can find our shows wherever you listen to podcasts, so give them a try. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate and review our shows. It really helps other people find them and keep our team inspired. Alley Chats is a production of Southgate Media Group, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Rob Southgate. Thanks again for listening to Alley Chats.